After my wife divorced me for her rich lover, I told my assistant, take everything from them. The first thing my wife took from me was not the house. It was my chair. At least, that was what I remembered most clearly. There were 22 people around the long mahogany table at the Hawthorne Club that evening. Lawyers, investors, old family friends, and 2 members of Evelyn's family who had once called me son. Yet when I entered the private dining room, the chair beside my wife had already been occupied. By him, Damian Cross, 41 years old, custom Italian suit, private equity money, the kind of man whose watch cost more than the apartment where I had grown up, and apparently, the kind of man my wife had decided should occupy my place before our divorce papers were even signed. Evelyn looked up as I entered. For half a second, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, annoyance, as if I had arrived late to a funeral that would have been easier without the corpse. Daniel, she said. No warmth, no hesitation, just my name. Damian leaned back in my chair. He smiled. You made it. I took the empty seat at the far end of the table. Evelyn's attorney slid a leather folder toward me. Inside were the papers that would end 8 years of marriage. The numbers were neat. The language was polite. The cruelty was hidden in 12-point font. Evelyn wanted the house, the lake property, her car, most of the shared investment portfolio. I could keep my old sedan, my personal accounts, and the small consulting firm she had spent years calling my little side business. I read every page. No one spoke. Crystal glasses clinked softly beneath the chandeliers. Somewhere behind the closed doors, a pianist was playing something slow and expensive. Then Evelyn exhaled. Daniel, please don't make this difficult. I looked up. She had worn the diamond earrings I gave her on our 5th anniversary. I remembered standing outside the jewelry store in the rain because my credit card had initially been declined. I remembered taking 3 extra consulting projects that month, so she would never know. Now those diamonds caught the light while she sat beside another man. I'm not making it difficult, I said. Damian gave a quiet laugh. Evelyn's mother looked away. Evelyn leaned forward. You know what I mean. I did. She wanted anger. Begging, perhaps. Something that would justify what she had already decided. Instead, I closed the folder. Is this everything? My attorney, Marcus Hale, glanced at me. He had known me since college. He knew that question meant something. Evelyn didn't. Yes, she said. Then I'll sign. Her eyes narrowed. Damian's smile faded slightly. I picked up the pen. Before I touched it to the paper, Evelyn spoke again. There's something you should understand. I stopped. She looked around the table, almost embarrassed to say it in front of everyone. Then she said it anyway. I can't keep living small. The room became very quiet. Evelyn folded her hands. I spent years waiting for you to become someone. Marcus stared at her. I didn't. I kept my eyes on the signature line. She continued. You always had plans. Ideas. Someday this. Someday that. But someday never came. Damian took a slow sip of wine. Evelyn's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. You're a good man, Daniel. There it was. The sentence people used when they were about to explain why goodness wasn't enough. But I need more than good. I signed the first page. She watched me. I want a man I can be proud of. I signed the second. Damian leaned toward her. His hand touched the back of her chair. I signed the third. Evelyn finally said the thing I would remember years later, long after I had forgotten the exact color of the room. You were comfortable being ordinary. My pen stopped. Only for a second. Then I finished my signature. I pushed the documents toward her attorney. Congratulations, I said. Evelyn blinked. On what? Getting everything you asked for. Damian smirked. You'll recover. I looked at him for the first time. He had the relaxed confidence of a man who believed money made consequences negotiable. Maybe, until that moment, it always had. I stood. Evelyn looked almost disappointed. You're just leaving? Yes. That's it. I glanced at the chair beside her. My chair. No, I said quietly. That's not it. Then I walked. Out. Rain had begun by the time I reached the sidewalk. No driver waited for me. No black car. No umbrella. I crossed 3 blocks through the rain to the parking garage, carrying everything left from my marriage in one leather briefcase. 8 years reduced to signatures. The apartment I rented that night was on the 17th floor of a building with stained carpet and unreliable heating. The refrigerator hummed too loudly. The kitchen light flickered. There was one chair beside the window. For 3 weeks, I ate dinner there alone. Take-out noodles. Cold pizza. Coffee when I couldn't sleep. I never called Evelyn. Never drove past our old house. Never checked Damian's social media. But people made sure I knew. They always do. Friends sent photographs without realizing they were knives. Evelyn in Monaco. Evelyn stepping out of Damian's Bentley. Evelyn at a charity gala wearing red. Damian had bought her a sapphire necklace. Someone wrote beneath the photograph, "She finally found a man on her level." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I shut my phone off. The apartment became silent. On the table sat an old laptop. Beside it lay a folder I had carried from our house before signing the divorce papers. Evelyn had never asked what was inside. She had stopped asking about my work years earlier. I opened it. There were architectural diagrams, patent applications, market projections, shipping networks, energy storage estimates, and, clipped behind everything else, a handwritten page dated 6 years earlier. Asterion. That was the name. The company I had never built. The company Evelyn had once laughed about over breakfast. "You're going to compete with billion-dollar logistics firms from our garage." She had kissed my cheek afterward. Back then the laugh had still contained affection. Eventually, only the laugh remained. Asterion was based on a simple problem. Thousands of commercial facilities wasted enormous amounts of energy because their distribution systems, warehouses, and automated fleets were managed separately. I had designed software that allowed those systems to communicate, predict demand, move power, reroute inventory, reduce waste. Years earlier, 2 engineers had told me the architecture was impossible to scale. A venture capitalist had called it technically impressive and commercially suicidal. Evelyn had asked me to stop wasting evenings on it. So I did. Not completely. I worked on it after midnight. On weekends. On flights. In hotel rooms while Evelyn slept. But I never committed. There was always something more important. Her career. Her mother's medical bills. The house. Our life. Our marriage. That night, alone in the apartment, I realized something uncomfortable. Evelyn had not killed my dream. I had. I had placed it on a shelf voluntarily, and then blamed love for the dust. At 2:13 in the morning, I opened a blank email. I wrote to 3 people. Marcus Hale, an engineer named Sophie Chun, and a former classmate named Isaac Reed, who had once offered to invest in Asterion before I decided it was too risky. The message contained only 6 words. "I'm ready to build it now." I hit send. Then I went to sleep. For the first time in months, I slept until sunrise. Asterion's first office was not impressive. It occupied the 2nd floor above a bakery. Every morning the ventilation system filled our conference room with the smell of cinnamon and burnt sugar. We had 6 desks. For employees, 1 working printer, and enough capital to survive 11 months if no one made a mistake. We made many. Our first pilot failed after 17 days. Our second investor withdrew 2 hours before signing. A supplier sued us. An engineer quit. A major client laughed during my presentation and asked why he should trust his entire infrastructure to a divorcee with a laptop. I thanked him for his time. Then I went downstairs, sat inside my old sedan, and pressed both hands against the steering wheel until they stopped shaking. I never told anyone. The next morning, I returned at 6. That became my life. Coffee before sunrise. Code reviews. Airport lounges. Factories. Warehouses. Meetings where people looked through me. Flights where I slept sitting upright. Nights when the city went dark and our office windows remained lit. Pain is not automatically useful. Most pain simply hurts. But discipline can give pain. Somewhere to go? Mine went into Asterion. Month by month. Line by line. Contract by contract. 2 years after my divorce, we landed our first national logistics client. 3 years after, we entered Europe. In the 4th year, one of the largest shipping companies in Asia licensed our infrastructure platform. In the 5th, Asterion acquired the company whose investor had once called us commercially suicidal. I kept his original rejection letter framed in my office. Not because I hated him, because he had been correct based on the man I was at the time. The company required someone I had not yet become. By year 6, Asterion Global controlled infrastructure technology across 14 countries. Business magazines wanted interviews. Television networks wanted profiles. I declined most of them. My photograph rarely appeared anywhere. The press eventually gave me a nickname, the Invisible Founder. I hated it. Sophie thought it was hilarious. My assistant, Adrian Cole, thought it was useful. Adrian had joined me during Asterion's 2nd year. He was 32 then, quiet, surgical, and terrifyingly competent. He remembered names I forgot. He anticipated questions before meetings. He could look at a 600-page acquisition report and find the 3 numbers everyone else hoped I would miss. 6 years after the divorce, he entered my office one Thursday morning carrying a black folder. Cross Meridian submitted the revised proposal, he said. I looked up. Cross Meridian, Damian Cross's company. I had known for several months that his private equity empire was in trouble. The press didn't. Neither did most of his employees. But Adrian did. Cross Meridian had overextended itself during an aggressive acquisition spree. It had borrowed against commercial properties with declining values. 3 subsidiaries were bleeding cash. 2 pension funds were preparing to withdraw. And Cross Meridian's largest technology supplier had announced it would terminate its contract within 90 days. The supplier was us. Asterion. Irony rarely announces itself. Sometimes it simply sends an invoice. I opened the folder. How bad? If our platform agreement expires, they have perhaps 5 months before severe liquidity problems. And if we renew? Damian Cross survives. I leaned back. Adrian watched me. He knew about Evelyn. Everyone close to me did. But no one discussed her. She's on their board now, Adrian said. My eyes lifted. Evelyn? Yes. He placed another page in front of me. Evelyn Cross. She had married Damian 3 years after our divorce. I had known that too. What I had not known was that she had become Cross Meridian's executive vice chair. Adrian continued. They're hosting an investor gala next month. Cross wants to announce a strategic partnership that will reassure creditors. With us. Yes. I almost smiled. Does he know I own Asterion? He knows your name. But I don't believe he has connected you to his wife's former husband. Your public profile remains minimal. I turned toward the window. The city stretched below. 6 years earlier, Evelyn had told me I would never become a man she could be proud of. Now the company owned by the man she chose needed my signature to stay alive. Life had a sense of theater I could never have written convincingly. Adrian waited. What do you want me to do? I looked down at the Cross Meridian balance sheet. For one dangerous second, I imagined destruction. Cancel every agreement. Buy their debt. Force liquidation. Watch Damian lose his cars, his clubs, his private jet. Watch Evelyn walk through empty rooms. It would have been easy, and that frightened me more than the anger itself. Power changes the meaning of impulse. A poor man's rage can ruin a night. A powerful man's rage can ruin thousands of lives. There were 12,000 Cross Meridian employees who had never sat at that divorce table. They had mortgages, children, parents. They did not deserve to become casualties in my private war. So I asked Adrian another question. Is Cross Meridian salvageable? He nodded. The core logistics assets are excellent. The debt structure is the problem. Damian, also a problem. And Evelyn? Adrian hesitated. She signed several of the acquisition recommendations. I studied the report. Any fraud? We don't know. Find out. Adrian closed the folder. Quietly. Very. He started toward the door. Adrian. He stopped. I looked again at the company Damian had built his identity around. Take everything from them. His expression did not change. I finished the sentence. Everything they acquired through deception. Every hidden account. Every fraudulent contract. Every asset bought with money that wasn't theirs. Document it, preserve it, and send it to our legal team. Adrian nodded once. And if the company survives after that, we buy what remains. He understood. This was not revenge. Not yet. It was an audit. And sometimes truth does more damage than revenge ever could. 3 weeks later, Adrian returned. This time he carried 2 folders. He placed the red one on my desk. Damian has been moving losses between subsidiaries. I said nothing. Cross Meridian inflated asset valuations before 2 debt rounds. Several executives objected internally. One resigned. Illegal. Our counsel believes regulators will have questions. And Evelyn? Adrian placed the second folder down. She signed board approvals. I opened it. My chest tightened. There was her signature. The same elegant E. The same confident downward stroke. I had watched that signature appear on birthday cards, mortgage documents, anniversary notes. Now it sat beneath transactions that could destroy an empire. Did she know? We can't establish that. Then don't assume it. Adrian nodded. There's more. Damian had used a holding company to purchase shares before Cross Meridian publicly announced acquisitions that drove those shares higher. Insider trading. If proven, prison was possible. I closed the folder. When is the gala? Friday. Accept the invitation. Adrian looked surprised. You're going? Yes. The ballroom of the St. Regis looked exactly like the kind of room Evelyn had always wanted me to belong in. Gold light, white orchids, crystal, black tuxedos, women wearing dresses worth more than most annual salaries. A string quartet played near a wall of glass overlooking the river. I arrived without photographers. Adrian walked beside me. No entourage, no dramatic entrance. Just a dark suit, a silver watch, and 6 years between the man entering that room and the man who had walked alone through the rain. I saw Evelyn before she saw me. She stood near the center of the ballroom. Emerald dress, hair pulled back, champagne glass in one hand. For a moment, memory struck harder than expected. I remembered her barefoot in our first apartment. I remembered burnt pancakes, road trips, arguments over paint colors, the way she once slept with her hand resting on my chest. People are rarely monsters in every memory. That is what makes losing them difficult. Then Damian appeared beside her. Older now, tension around his mouth. He still carried himself like a man, certain the floor belonged beneath his feet. Evelyn turned. Her eyes found me. The champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. She stared. 6 years vanished between us. Then she crossed the ballroom. Daniel. I gave a small nod. Evelyn. Her gaze moved over my suit. Then to Adrian. Then back to me. What are you doing here? I was invited. A faint smile appeared. Not kind. Not cruel either. Instinctive. The old hierarchy returning. By whom? The organizers. She laughed softly. I suppose consulting has improved. Adrian glanced at me. I nearly smiled. Yes, I said. It has. Damian approached. He looked at me for several seconds before recognition arrived. Then he grinned. Well. He held out his hand. Daniel Mercer. I shook it. Damian. I haven't seen you since the divorce. Yes. His grip tightened slightly. I heard you started something. I did. Technology? Something like that. He glanced toward Evelyn. I always told her entrepreneurship requires a certain temperament. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably. Damian continued. Risk tolerance. Vision. Access to serious capital. Useful things. He smiled. So what brings you into our world tonight? Our world. The phrase almost made me pity him. Before I could answer, an event coordinator approached. Mr. Mercer? Damian glanced at her. Yes. She ignored him. Mr. Mercer, the chairman asked if you're ready. We'll begin in 5 minutes. Damian's smile disappeared. Evelyn looked between us. Ready for what? The coordinator hesitated. I answered. The announcement. Damian's face changed first. Not understanding. Then calculation. Then fear. What announcement? A bell sounded through the ballroom. Guests began moving toward the stage. The quartet stopped. The chairman of Cross Meridian climbed the stairs beneath a massive illuminated screen. Damian turned toward me. Daniel. I adjusted my cuff. The room quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman began. Tonight marks a decisive moment in the future of Cross Meridian. Applause. Damian did not clap. Neither did Evelyn. For the past 6 months, we have been seeking a strategic technology partner capable of stabilizing and modernizing our global infrastructure. The screen behind him changed. The Asterion logo appeared. Whispers moved across the room. The chairman smiled. It is my privilege to welcome the founder and chief executive of Asterion Global. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her glass. Mr. Daniel Mercer. For 1 second, nobody near us moved. Then the room erupted. Applause rolled beneath the chandeliers. People stood. Damian stared at me. Evelyn's face had gone completely still. I walked toward the stage. I did not look back. That was the moment I had imagined years ago without admitting it. The revelation. The regret. The perfect reversal. But as I climbed those steps, something unexpected happened. I felt almost nothing. No rush. No triumph. The applause sounded distant. The chairman shook my hand. I looked across hundreds of faces. Then I saw Evelyn. She was staring at me as though someone had rewritten history while she wasn't watching. Damian stood beside her. Pale. I approached the microphone. Thank you. The room settled. Asterion was invited here tonight to discuss a partnership. Damian's shoulders loosened slightly. I continued. After reviewing Cross Meridian's financial position, we will not be entering that partnership. Silence. Damian stopped breathing. Instead, this morning Asterion acquired controlling positions in 3 of Cross Meridian's primary debt facilities. Whispers exploded. Evelyn turned to Damian. I continued. We have also submitted an offer to acquire Cross Meridian's viable logistics operations, subject to independent review. Damian took one step forward. Then came the line that truly ended him. During due diligence, our auditors identified irregularities that we were legally obligated to report to the relevant authorities. A sound escaped Evelyn. Small, almost inaudible. Damian stared at me with murder in his eyes. I met his gaze. No smile. No satisfaction. Just certainty. This process will protect employees, creditors, and legitimate shareholders while allowing investigators to determine individual responsibility. I stepped back from the microphone. The chairman's hands were trembling. Someone near the stage began whispering into a phone. Damian pushed through the crowd toward me. You son of a... Security moved instantly. He stopped. Dozens of phones were already recording. He looked around. For the first time in his life, perhaps, Damian understood that money could not buy privacy fast enough. You planned this, he said. No, liar. You destroyed your company before I arrived. His jaw tightened. You think this makes you better than me? No, I looked at him. It makes me your creditor. He lunged forward. Security caught him. Cameras flashed. Evelyn stood 20 feet away. She did not move. Her champagne glass had slipped from her hand. Broken crystal glittered at her feet. 3 months later, Damian Cross was indicted. The investigation uncovered fraudulent reporting, insider transactions, concealed liabilities, and misuse of corporate funds. Cross Meridian entered restructuring. Asterion acquired its core logistics division. 11,400 employees kept their jobs. Evelyn was never charged. Investigators concluded that while she had signed several board approvals, there was insufficient evidence she knew Damian had falsified the underlying reports. But her career was finished anyway. Boards stopped returning calls. Invitations disappeared. The same society pages that had celebrated her marriage now published photographs of her leaving legal offices alone. I did not celebrate. Success teaches you how little satisfaction there is in watching another person fall, especially someone you once loved. One evening, Adrian entered my office. Evelyn Mercer is downstairs. I looked. Up. Cross. She's using Mercer again. I said nothing. Do you want security to send her away? For a long moment, I watched the city beyond the window. Then I shook my head. Let her up. She entered 10 minutes later. No emerald dress. No diamonds. No photographers. She wore a gray coat and held a small leather handbag. For the first time in years, she looked like the woman I remembered. Not because she looked younger. Because she looked tired. Real. She stopped several feet from my desk. Hi. Hi. Her eyes moved through the office. Then toward the framed rejection letter on the wall. Asterion, she whispered. Yes. You kept working on it. I did. She laughed once. But there was no humor in it. I told you it was ridiculous. You did. I told everyone. I remained silent. She walked toward the window. I saw an interview with Sophie Chan. I waited. She said you almost quit twice. Probably more. She said there were months you couldn't make payroll without using your own savings. That happened. Evelyn turned. Why didn't you tell me? The question was so strange I almost didn't understand it. After the divorce? Before. I looked at her. I did. Her expression broke slightly. You talked about Asterion constantly when we were first married. You showed me prototypes. Forecasts. Remember? She looked down. I stopped listening. Yes. Her eyes filled. I thought you were wasting your life. I know. I thought Damian was... She stopped. More. She nodded. The words seemed to hurt. I thought he was everything you weren't. I walked to the small table near the window and poured water into a glass. I offered it to her. She took it. Her hands shook. Did you know? She asked. About Damian? About the investigation. Before the gala. Yes. And you still came. Yes. Her eyes hardened for the first time. So it was revenge. I considered the question. Partly. She looked surprised by the answer. I could pretend I was above it. I wasn't. Silence. I wanted you to see me. Her lips parted. I wanted you to understand what you had been wrong about. I looked toward the window. But somewhere along the way, that stopped mattering. A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly. I'm sorry. I said nothing. I know that's useless. It's not useless. She looked at me. It's just late. Her mouth trembled. I was cruel to you. Yes. I made you feel small. Yes. I thought if a man didn't look successful, he wasn't successful. I leaned against the edge of the table. You didn't leave because I had no future, Evelyn. She closed her eyes. You left because you couldn't see one. The words hung between us. When she opened her eyes again, she was crying silently. I loved you. I know. I think part of me still does. That hurt. Not because I wanted her back. Because once, hearing those words would have meant everything. Now they arrived in a room where they had nowhere to live. She stepped closer. If I had stayed, don't. She stopped. You don't know what would have happened. I shook my head. Neither do you. For a moment, we simply stood there. Two people looking at the ruins of a life that had once seemed permanent. Then she whispered, "Is there any chance?" I knew exactly what she meant. I wished I could hate her. Hatred would have made the answer easier. Instead, I remembered the good years. The cheap apartment. The burnt pancakes. Her hand on my chest. The woman she had been before contempt slowly replaced affection. And I understood that forgiveness and return were not the same thing. I forgave you a long time ago. Hope flashed across her face. Then I continued. But I'm not going back. Her hope disappeared. I spoke gently. What happened between us changed me. She swallowed. It changed you too. She nodded. I hope the person you become next is someone you don't have to apologize for. She looked at me for a long time. Then she placed something on the table. A wedding ring. Mine. I stared at it. I found it in the old house when Damian sold it, she said. I had forgotten she kept it. I thought you might want it. I picked it up. The metal felt lighter than I remembered. No, I placed it back in her palm. You keep it. Why? Because that man existed. She looked confused. The man who wore that ring loved you completely. My voice lowered. He wasn't weak. Because he did. Her fingers closed around it. He just hadn't learned to love himself the same way. Evelyn began crying again. This time she didn't hide it. She nodded. Then she walked toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped. Daniel. Yes. I am proud of you. There had been a time when those words could have saved our marriage. Now they simply crossed the room and disappeared. I smiled. Not cruelly. Not triumphantly. Take care of yourself, Evelyn. She left. The door closed softly. Adrian found me near the window 20 minutes later. He placed a folder on my desk. Cross-Meridian integration is complete. I opened it. Revenue stable. Employee retention above projections. Debt reduced. No champagne. No headlines. Just numbers. Thousands of ordinary people going to work Monday morning because a company had been rebuilt instead of burned down. Adrian glanced toward the door. How did it go? She apologized. And I believed her. He waited. That's all. That's enough. He nodded. Then his eyes moved to the original Cross-Meridian acquisition file still sitting on one of my shelves. You remember what you told me? I smiled faintly. Take everything from them. You almost sounded frightening. I was frightening. To me. To myself. Adrian laughed. I looked out at the city. 6 years earlier, I had stood in the rain with a leather briefcase and nowhere that felt like home. I had believed Evelyn had taken everything. The house. The marriage. My confidence. My future. But she had not taken those things. Some I had given away. Some I had abandoned. Some had never belonged to her in the first place. That was the truth revenge rarely tells you. When someone leaves, humiliation makes you believe your value left with them. So you imagine the day you will return richer, stronger, untouchable. You imagine their face when they realize what they lost. And perhaps that day comes. Perhaps the room goes silent. Perhaps the people who laughed eventually applaud. But none of that repairs you. Not really. The repair happens earlier. At 2 in the morning. In the empty apartment. When no one is watching. When you decide to stand up without knowing whether anyone will ever regret knocking you down. A year after the acquisition, I returned to the Hawthorne Club. Not for Evelyn. Not for Damian. Asterion was hosting a scholarship dinner for young engineers who could not afford university. The same mahogany table was there. The same chandeliers. Perhaps even some of the same waiters. I arrived early. 22 chairs surrounded the table. I stopped beside the one where Damian had sat on the night of my divorce. For a moment, I remembered Evelyn's voice. I want a man I can be proud of. I pulled the chair out. Then I laughed quietly. Not because I had won. Because I finally understood. I had spent too much of my life waiting for someone else to decide whether I deserved a seat. I sat down. Outside. Rain traced silver lines across the windows. Inside, young students began entering the room with nervous smiles, borrowed suits, and futures they could not yet imagine. One of them approached me. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes." He held out his hand. "My name is Noah. I received the Asterion Scholarship." I stood and shook it. "Congratulations." He smiled. "I read about how you built the company. Don't believe everything you read." He laughed. Then he became serious. "My father said people like us don't build companies like Asterion." I studied him. 20 years old. Cheap suit. Old shoes. Hope disguised as uncertainty. I knew that look. "What do you think?" I asked. He glanced around the room. "I don't know yet." I pulled out the chair beside mine. "Then sit down." He did. Guests continued arriving. The room filled with voices. Light reflected from the glasses. The pianist began to play. And for the first time, the Hawthorne Club did not feel like the place where my marriage ended. It felt like a room. Nothing more. A room had no power unless you gave it memory. A chair had no meaning unless you waited for someone else to offer it. And revenge? Revenge was smaller than I once believed. Damian lost his empire. Evelyn lost the life she had chosen over me. But their losses were not my victory. My victory happened long before either of them fell. It happened the night I opened an old laptop in a silent apartment. The night I stopped, asking why I had not been enough for her, and started asking why I had abandoned myself trying to become enough. Years later, the world called me successful, billionaire, founder, CEO. They used numbers to describe the distance I had traveled, but numbers never understood it. The greatest thing I built was not Asterion. It was the life that existed after I stopped needing the woman who left me to regret leaving. I looked across the table as the scholarship students took their seats. Outside, the rain continued falling. I thought about that night 6 years ago. The divorce papers. The empty chair. The diamonds. Damian's smile. Evelyn telling me I was ordinary. Maybe she had been right. I had been ordinary. A man who loved his wife. A man who made sacrifices. A man who delayed his dreams because he believed there would always be more time. There was nothing shameful about that man. He simply needed to learn that devotion without self-respect becomes disappearance. The waiter poured water into my glass. Noah asked me a question about his engineering project. I leaned closer to listen, and somewhere in the middle of answering him, I realized I had not thought about Evelyn for the rest of the evening. Not once. That was when I knew the story was finally over. I had told Adrian to take everything from them. In the end, we took only what the law and truth demanded. Damian lost what dishonesty had built. Evelyn lost what contempt had chosen. And I recovered the one thing neither of them had ever truly possessed. Myself. I did not become successful to make my ex-wife regret leaving me. I became successful when I finally stopped living for the day she would. And that was the only revenge worth keeping.